It's no secret that union membership in Australia is at an all-time low. Since 1992, the proportion of men who are unionists in their main job has fallen from more than 43% to less than 13%. It's slightly higher for women at about 16%, but guess where the highest rates of union membership remain? In education, public sector administration, and my personal favourite, the safety industry. Either way, the trend is unequivocal. Union membership is money taken out of your pay packet and given not to the government for services for everybody, not to child support or alimony payments for the benefit of your family, but to people who couldn't find productive work anywhere else in the economy and so shill on your behalf. You could argue that they're providing a service in exchange for cash, but I'd argue it's more akin to mobsters skimming off the top to harass people and push workplace boundaries you'd rather not. Now, unionists and the Labor Party like to claim this moral high ground about how they're the only ones fighting for the downtrodden, while Malcolm Turnbull and his rich banker mates make off with the spoils of the economy. It's a brilliant narrative, and a hell of a lot of people still buy into it, 1.6 million according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But it's false. Trade unions aren't about making life better for everyone at all. In fact, they're a selfish cabal of people who want to keep the spoils of your labour for themselves, and the spoils of productive enterprise for those who pay their dues. Union membership is voluntary, or at least it's supposed to be when unions follow the rules. There are examples of no-ticket, no-work practices at large building sites all over Melbourne, and I'm sure there are some around the country at large. But let's say you work in a small to medium manufacturing business with profit margins getting finer and finer every year. What do you think happens when a few staff take it upon themselves to not only demand more money for no extra productivity or work, but then picket the front of the business? The media swoops in to tell the story of an evil capitalist mistreating the workers by paying them exactly what they agreed to be paid when they signed their contract of employment. That's great marketing right there. You're really giving your own business the chance to shine and expand into the international economy. But it's more than just a bad look. Eventually the business agrees to pay its workers, say, $30 an hour instead of $20. It has to do this for all its employees because you can't suddenly have some workers being paid more than others for the same job. So profit margins decrease further, the business's productive output remains unchanged, and guess what? People get laid off, or simply not hired in the first place. You're not making the harsh capitalist world fairer for everybody. You're sacrificing that greater good so you can take home a couple of extra bucks without having to really work for it. That's the ultimate height of selfishness, which socialism is supposed to combat, not entrench. This is why there are more unionists in the public sector by far. 38% of public sector workers are union members, compared to just 9% in the private sector. Their company can't go broke. It's only mug taxpayers that cop it when public sector workers get an undeserved pay rise. So the ability of the government to deliver more services to those who can least afford them in the competitive free market is compromised. Again, the sort of outcome that a socialised democracy is designed to prevent. And yet our public sector unionists behave like the most selfish of capitalists in their greed, their greatest achievement being a reduction in the quality and quantity of services that we all pay for. But what about our young people, those selfish, entitled millennials we keep hearing about? These are the people Sally McManus is targeting with her envious Change the Rules campaign to get more young'uns pissed off about the fact that people who've trained more and have infinitely more experience just so happen to make more money than those in entry-level roles. It turns out our youth aren't as selfish and entitled as you think. Only 4% of 15 to 19-year-olds, many of whom work in the lowest paid fields that exist, and 7% of 20 to 24-year-olds have decided to follow the me mentality of the give me more money gangs. Now, I've worked in customer service roles in retail my entire life, and believe me, there are times when I've thought you couldn't possibly pay me enough to cop shtick from rude customers who don't even see a person behind the counter. But for me to go out and demand more money would be to not only value my input more than that of my peers doing exactly the same work, it would put the entire business at risk. They'd be unable to hire more people as the business grew, and in tough times like we saw in the 2007 economic crisis, people would have lost their jobs entirely as businesses shrank or collapsed entirely. It's already happened in much of Australia's manufacturing sector. Holden and Ford, the government had to kick in more and more taxpayer dollars that would otherwise have been used for public services to these private companies so they could pay their assembly line workers more and more money each year for the same tasks, until they finally said enough is enough, no more free money. And guess what? We no longer make motor vehicles in Australia. That's not sticking up for the little guy, that's sticking it to the little guy. So you get to shop at David Jones instead of Target. It's the most selfish thing you could possibly do in an environment where you're voluntarily exchanging your labour for cash. And that is why Sally and the union crew who skim off the top of your pay packet have suddenly changed their focus to the highest paid examples they can find. You know, the people at the top of their fields who work upwards of 70 hours a week, take their work with them wherever they go, sacrifice their time with their own families and put every spare second on their calendar into bettering themselves. I promise you they're not members of the unions, but how can it possibly be fair that they make more money than me? Well, when I was a councillor for the Mornington Peninsula Shire, I was part of a group responsible for hiring a new chief executive officer, who essentially runs the organisation, while us councillors would act more like a board of directors. We had to set a pay packet on the order of $400,000 a year to get the best person for the job, because running an organisation with a yearly budget of more than $1 billion and more than 1,000 employees is well beyond your average 38-hour working week. Now, councillors made the grand total of $28,000 a year, plus a bit of reimbursement for travel, and had to face the people for election every 4 years. By Sally's logic, I should have been fomenting an uprising amongst the board at the fact that we would be paying someone 14 times our salary. But Sally McManus is wrong, and the rules are there because they work. To actually make it to that level requires lifestyle sacrifices that those of us who get to clock off at the end of the day are just not willing to make. It requires an almost sociopathic level of focus, dedication to a single, often repetitive task from a very young age, when most of us are out drinking at pubs and building social lives, not to mention the insane periods of absence from spouses and children, or no family at all, and a willingness to take ultimate responsibility for the actions and mistakes of hundreds or thousands of people. They maintain inhuman levels of physical and mental fitness, are better read than the most conscientious librarian, and take multi-million-dollar risks as often as the rest of us read a payslip. The only people who believe that the CEO's success in life has come at the expense of you personally are those with a vested interest in furthering the class war narrative, people like Bill Shorten. Despite endlessly professing his empathy for those at the bottom of the pile as leader of the Australian Workers' Union, he actually sold out the 36-hour working week for a $300,000 donation to his union and his election campaign from these supposedly evil multinational corporations. Honestly, the selfishness of these fake class warriors knows no bounds. It's cynical, it's evil, and it doesn't help anyone looking to break into the employment market at all. It benefits those who are already there at the expense of everyone else in the long run. Sally McManus's Change the Rules campaign centres on, wait for it, changing the rules, ostensibly by regulating the activity of businesses under the guise of market failure. But guess who benefits the most from intrusive regulations into business activity? That's right, those evil multinational megacorporations. As Anthony Davies in the Washington Times has observed, more regulations simply mean more ways for big business to manipulate the law to shut out competition. We've seen it here in every industry, from taxis to the unions themselves. I'd like to believe Sally's just being a little naive here, but it's far more likely she's being deliberately disingenuous. You see, unions are a protected business in Australia, and yes, they most certainly are a business. You pay them for a service, but unlike most other products and services, competition has been explicitly forbidden by regulations put in place by various Labor governments over the years, because it also happens to be where Labor get the vast majority of their campaign funds. It's infinitely easier to generate vast sums of income from a union with critical mass than it is to market various unions that'll behave in a whole bunch of different ways to get the best outcomes for workers. And guess who's most vocally in support of banning the free donation of your money to other political parties? That's right, the Labor left. It's fine for them to annex funds designed to improve your workplace for myriad other political purposes, but it's just not on for a small business owner to put their money where their mouth is and support the party that'll deliver them the best outcome. So the next time Sally McManus uses her legally ensconced national platform to tell you we need more rules and regulations to protect the workers, have a look at where her own money and power is coming from. Your pay packet. Don't give your money away to people who are already rich with political power. Save it to pay the taxes that actually benefit society and provide services we all need. Our youngest workers seem to have figured this out, so let's build on their good work.